Hello, 8 Green students. Today we are going to wrap up our Chapter 7 Creating a Republic unit and talk about the ratification process of the new U.S. Constitution. So the word ratify or ratification means official approval of something. So in this case, we are looking to approve the new U.S. Constitution that the 55 delegates created at the Constitutional Convention. And not everybody was in favor of this new Constitution. Not even everybody who was at the convention was in favor of this new Constitution. So we're going to walk through the two sides debated and look at the pros and cons of this new government. So let's start with the Anti-Federalists. And if you are anti-something, then you are against something. So in this case, these people were against this new Constitution. Reasons they were against it. Number one, they thought that it gave way too much power to the federal government. Remember, they are coming off of a very weak federal government under the Articles of Confederation where the states were more powerful, and this new Constitution shifted that, shifted the power from the states to the federal government. They believed that too much power was given to the executive branch, which was ran by one person. They thought this new president might be able to abuse his power. We'll get to, the other side of that coin here in just a few minutes. This new Constitution obviously gave the power to tax to the federal government, something that was missing from the Articles of Confederation. We needed money to fund the government, and this new Constitution would allow that, and this made a lot of people nervous. Remember, we fought the revolution essentially over taxes. And the fourth major point was this new Constitution did not spell out any individual freedoms for the people. The Bill of Rights did not exist yet, and so there was nothing in the new Constitution that talked about individual freedoms or personal liberties, things like freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right to bear arms. None of that stuff existed in the Constitution in its truest form. Here are some of the famous Anti-Federalists, guys like Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, some guys you haven't heard of, Richard Henry Lee, George Mason, and Edmund Randolph. But if you look at these guys right here, these were your hotheads, your volatile guys during the American Revolution. These guys were against powerful governments, and those reasons that I just outlined kind of explain why they were against it. Thomas Jefferson really was against this because it didn't have the Bill of Rights. Remember, Jefferson's all about protecting individual freedoms, and because this new Constitution didn't specifically address personal freedoms for the people, that's kind of why he was against it. All right, so let's look at the Federalists. So these people are in favor of this new Constitution. They thought the new Constitution provided a very good balance of power between the states and the federal government. The states didn't lose all of their powers. They were able to keep some of their powers, and we'll talk about that next chapter. But the Federalists believed in this structure. There was a good balance of power and checks and balances among the three branches. And so the counter argument to, well, the president's going to have too much power. Well, no, not really, because Congress and the Supreme Court can check his powers. Political leaders would be elected by the people, and that was a big deal. And so if a president or a politician was abusing their powers, then the people can make a change every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, depending on which politician we're looking to remove from office. And the Federalists did agree that a Bill of Rights was necessary, and they promised one, but they really wanted to get this new government in place as soon as possible, and they really didn't want to wait until the process of creating a Bill of Rights was completed. So they agreed that it needed a Bill of Rights, and they promised to have one. They just wanted to get the document ratified and get the new government in place pretty quickly. So although the other side had guys like Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, and Thomas Jefferson, this side has James Madison, George Washington, Ben Franklin, John Jay, Paul Revere, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, Roger Sherman, and John Hancock. And if you remember, John Hancock was one of the kind of vocal leaders of the Revolution as well, similar to Sam Adams and Patrick Henry, but he was in favor of this new government. as were a lot of these revolutionaries. A lot of heavy hitters there. All right, the Federalist Papers. So the Federalist Papers were a series of 85 essays that were published anonymously under the name Publius. At the time, nobody knew who the authors were. We now know who the authors were. These 85 essays defended and supported the Constitution, and each Federalist paper picked a different part of the Constitution and explained to the people in very common terms why this was a positive thing, this change to the U.S. Constitution. And they literally were called Federalist Paper number 1, Federalist Paper number 2, Federalist Paper number 10, Federalist Paper number 57, all the way up to number 85. And these Federalist Papers reassured Americans they would not be overpowered by the new federal government, and that the government would work for them, work for the people. So who actually wrote the Federalist Papers? We now know that Publius was actually Alexander Hamilton. He wrote 51 of the 85 essays. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, of course he's going to support it and defend it. It was his ideas in it. He wrote 26. A guy named John Jay. John Jay goes on to become our first ever Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So pretty important person, kind of starting right around this time period. We didn't really learn about him in the American Revolution. But John Jay wrote 5 of them. And then Hamilton and Madison collaborated on 3 of them. So if you add all those numbers up, you get 85. And in one of James Madison's Federalist Papers, one of the most famous quotes is, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." So think about that for a second. Okay, Madison's trying to tell you why we need this strong, powerful government. And the reason why is because mankind, we're not angels. Okay, we don't always do the right thing. And I think we've seen that over the last several months, going all the way back to the summertime, and we've certainly seen it the last couple of days. A lot of civil unrest over the summertime, some civil unrest going on now. We've got to have a strong presence. We've got to have a strong federal government. We've got to have a standing army, and in this case, National Guard. We've got to have those things because men are not angels. If men were angels, we wouldn't need any government at all. So the ratification process, to officially approve this document, they needed 9 of the 13 states to give a thumbs up to it. So each of the 13 states held ratification meetings, and each state brought in what they would consider qualified politicians to debate and discuss it, and then they voted. And it just took a simple majority vote within your state to say yes or no. Of course, Rhode Island, they're still kind of being stubborn and hard-headed. They wouldn't even hold a ratification meeting. Remember, they didn't even want to change the Articles of Confederation to begin with. Delaware actually ratified pretty quickly. Within a few months of the convention being over, Delaware became the first state to officially enter our Union, December 7th, 1787. Now, of course, it doesn't go into effect until we can get 8 more states. And that took another 6 months. We finally get New Hampshire being the 9th state, June 21st, 1788. So even though this document was created summer of 1787, it doesn't go into effect until June 21st, 1788. As promised, a Bill of Rights was created, and James Madison, the father of our Constitution, wrote most of these. He did ask for suggestions from the states and various politicians, and over 200 amendments were sent to him. Congress and Madison sat down and they looked at every single suggestion that came their way, and they ended up creating 12 amendments. They sent those 12 amendments back to the states, and when the state conventions voted, they ended up approving 10 of them. It's a nice round number. They didn't do it on purpose. The Bill of Rights could have easily been 9 amendments or 11 amendments or 12 amendments or 7 amendments, but it ended up being that 10 of the 12 were ratified. The other 2 that were initially proposed have since been ratified later on, but they are just other amendments. They're not considered part of the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10. And we will study those first 10 amendments next chapter in our government unit. Rhode Island finally gets on board May of 1790, almost 2 years after the Constitution went into effect. Rhode Island finally got on board, but they waited until the Bill of Rights was officially added, and then they went ahead and approved the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as they were. And that is the ratification process that took place from 1787 through 1788, and then even extended into 1790 with the Bill of Rights and Rhode Island getting on board. Thanks for watching.